Clara sighed as she folded the last of the laundry in their tiny apartment. It had been a long day at school, and all she wanted was a quiet evening. As she reached for Mark's jacket to toss it in the wash, her hand froze. A crumpled envelope peeked out of the pocket. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she pulled it out, smoothing the creases. Her heart sank. Eviction notice. The bold red text at the top felt like a slap in the face. The letter detailed that they were 3 months behind on rent. How could this be? She had trusted Mark to handle the bills while she managed their household. "Mark," she called, her voice trembling, but it wasn't anger, it was fear. Mark appeared in the doorway, his easy smile fading the moment he saw her holding the notice. "What's this?" Clara demanded, her voice unsteady. Mark hesitated, his hand rubbing the back of his neck, a telltale sign that he was nervous. "I can explain," he began, but Clara interrupted him. "Explain what? That we're about to lose our home? That you've been hiding this from me for months?" Mark stepped closer, trying to take the notice from her hands. "Clara, listen. It's not what you think. I had to help Sophia. She needed money for the kids' school fees, and then the car broke down." Clara's eyes widened. "You gave our rent money to your sisters?" "She's been struggling since her husband passed," Mark said defensively. "I couldn't just let her go under." Clara's anger bubbled to the surface. "So, instead, you decided to let us go under?" She waved the notice in his face. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? Or were you planning to wait until we were out on the street?" Mark reached for her hands, but Clara pulled away. "I was going to fix it," he said, his voice quieter now. "I've been working extra hours. I thought I could catch up before it got this far." "Fix it?" Clara repeated, her voice rising. "With what money, Mark? Because our savings are gone, aren't they?" Mark's silence was all the confirmation she needed. Clara turned away, her mind racing. Their home, the life they had built together. It all felt like a lie. And for what? So Sophia could keep up appearances? Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Sophia herself. "Can't wait for family dinner tomorrow. Love you both." The irony made Clara laugh bitterly. Sophia, who was apparently struggling, had time to plan dinners while they faced eviction. "I can fix this," Mark said again, his voice pleading now. "I just need more time." Clara stared at him. The man she had married 5 years ago, now a stranger. "You've made your choice, Mark," she said, her voice cold. "And it wasn't me." As Mark stood frozen in the doorway, Clara turned back to the laundry. She had no idea how they would get through this, but one thing was clear. Trust between them had been shattered. The next morning, Clara woke up early. Sleep had been elusive, her mind replaying the events of the previous night. The eviction notice sat on the kitchen counter, glaring at her like a bad omen. She stared at it as she sipped her coffee, her thoughts in turmoil. How had they reached this point? Had she been so blind to Mark's actions, so trusting that she didn't notice the warning signs? Mark was still asleep, or at least pretending to be. Clara didn't care. She needed space. Grabbing her bag, she left the apartment, letting the door slam behind her. Her destination was clear. She needed to talk to Tina. Tina's office was in a bustling part of downtown Portland. Clara had barely texted her friend a summary of the situation before Tina called back, her tone sharp and concerned. "Get here now," she had said. When Clara arrived, Tina was waiting outside, leaning against the building with 2 steaming cups of coffee in hand. "This better be a joke," Tina said, handing one to Clara as they started walking. "I wish it was," Clara muttered. She explained everything as they strolled along the park path nearby. The eviction notice, the drained savings, Mark's excuses, and Sophia's constant demands. Tina listened silently, her expression darkening with each word. When Clara finished, Tina stopped walking and faced her. "You're telling me Mark gave your savings to his sister, without telling you, while you're working yourself to the bone to keep things afloat?" "Yes," Clara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Saying it out loud made the betrayal cut even deeper. Tina sighed, shaking her head. "This isn't just a bad decision, Clara. It's a betrayal. He didn't even give you a chance to weigh in. He just took from you." Clara felt her throat tighten. I keep asking myself why he didn't trust me enough to tell me. I could have helped figure something out. Because he didn't want to hear no, Tina said bluntly. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, especially when he's trying to please Sophia. The mention of Sophia made Clara's blood boil. She's been living with us for months, Tina. Months. I thought she was trying to get back on her feet, but now it feels like she's just using us. And Mark's letting her, Tina said. You need to figure out where your line is, Clara. What's the limit before you've had enough? Clara didn't answer. She wasn't sure where her limit was yet, but she knew she was close. That evening, Clara returned home to find Sophia sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone. The television blared a reality show in the background, and the faint smell of popcorn lingered in the air. Her two young kids were running around the small living room, leaving toys scattered everywhere. Clara, Sophia said brightly, as if nothing was wrong. Dinner's almost ready. Hope you don't mind. I used that fancy pasta you bought last week. The kids were craving something special. Clara clenched her jaw. Fancy pasta? The same pasta she and Mark had decided to save for a rare date night? She forced a smile. No problem, she said, her voice tight. As Sophia turned back to her phone, Clara stepped into the kitchen. Mark was there, stirring a pot on the stove. He looked up when she walked in, guilt written all over his face. Clara, he started, but she cut him off. Not now, she said sharply. She didn't have the energy for another argument. Instead, she grabbed a glass of water and walked out, ignoring the tension hanging in the air. The next day, Clara sat in her classroom during her lunch break, staring at her phone. A notification had popped up from Sophia's Instagram account. Against her better judgment, she opened it. The post was a picture of Sophia's kids in brand new outfits, holding shopping bags from an upscale mall. The caption read, "Fresh start, new beginnings." So blessed. Clara's stomach turned. How could Sophia be flaunting expensive purchases while they were on the verge of eviction? She felt her frustration bubble over and texted Tina immediately.
Wine.
My place.
Tonight.
Tina arrived later with 2 bottles of red, her expression grim as Clara explained the latest outrage. She's using Instagram to brag about her life while draining ours. And Mark? He just stands by and lets her. Then stop letting him, Tina said firmly, pouring Clara a generous glass. You don't owe them anything, Clara. If they're going to treat you like a doormat, it's time to show them the door. Clara stared at the wine swirling in her glass. Tina was right, but it wasn't that simple. She had loved Mark, trusted him. Letting go of their life together wasn't something she could do lightly. The family dinner the following evening was everything Clara expected, and worse. Linda arrived early with a casserole dish in hand and immediately began organizing the table as if it were her home. Mark hovered near her, hanging on her every word. Sophia played the grieving widow, her kids the center of attention as usual. Clara sat silently through most of it, her appetite gone. She listened as Linda praised Mark for being such a good brother and scolded Clara for not being more understanding of family struggles. Finally, Clara had enough. She set her fork down with a sharp clink and looked directly at Sophia. Do you want to tell everyone the truth, or should I? The room went still. Sophia blinked, feigning innocence. What do you mean? I mean the truth about where the money really went. The shopping, the trips, the expensive meals, Clara said, her voice steady despite the anger simmering underneath. The money Mark took from me to give to you? Linda gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Mark looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Sophia's face hardened. I don't know what you're talking about. Clara pulled her phone from her pocket and opened the screenshots she had taken of Sophia's Instagram posts. She slid the phone across the table. Don't you? Because this doesn't look like someone who's struggling. Sophia glanced at the screen, her face pale. I was going to pay it back, she stammered.
When?
After we were homeless? Clara demanded. You've been lying to us this whole time, Sophia. Using your kids as an excuse to live off of us while we fall apart. Linda tried to interject, but Clara held up a hand. No, Linda. You don't get to lecture me about family loyalty when your daughter has been stealing from me. The table fell into silence. Clara stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm done, she said, her voice firm. I won't let you drag me down with you. Without waiting for a response, she walked out, leaving them all to sit in the mess they had created. Back at the apartment, Clara began packing her things. She didn't know what her next step would be, but one thing was certain. She couldn't stay. As she folded clothes into a suitcase, Mark appeared in the doorway. Clara, he said, his voice heavy with emotion.
Please don't do this.
We can fix it. She looked at him. The man she had once loved so deeply, now a stranger to her. You made your choice, Mark, she said quietly. And it wasn't me. Mark's shoulders slumped as Clara zipped up her suitcase. The weight of his betrayal hung heavy between them, and Clara knew it was a weight she could no longer carry. Clara spent the next few days staying at Tina's apartment. The small guest room she was using didn't feel like home, but it was better than staying in the place that had become a battleground. Tina had been endlessly supportive, offering wine, advice, and the occasional distraction, but Clara knew she couldn't stay here forever. She needed to figure out her next move. One evening, as Clara sat scrolling through job listings on her laptop, Tina walked in with 2 cups of tea. Any luck? She asked, handing Clara a mug. Clara shook her head.
Not yet.
I'm not sure what I'm even looking for. It feels like my whole life has been uprooted. Tina sat down beside her. You know, uprooting isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's the only way to grow. Clara gave her a small smile. You should write greeting cards. Seriously, though, Tina continued, leaning forward. You're not the one who should feel displaced here. Mark and Sophia are the ones who messed up. If anyone needs to uproot their lives, it's them, not you. Clara sighed. I know, but it's hard to walk away from everything I've built. Tina put a hand on her shoulder. You're not walking away, Clara. You're rebuilding. And trust me, you're going to build something so much stronger this time. The next day, Clara received a text from Mark. It was brief and to the point. Can we talk? Just us. She stared at the message for a long moment, her emotions a mix of anger, sadness, and curiosity. Part of her wanted to ignore it, but another part, the part that still remembered the man she had married, wanted answers. After a deep breath, she typed back, fine. Tomorrow. At the park. The following afternoon, Clara arrived at the park early. She sat on a bench under a large oak tree, the chilly Portland air nipping at her cheeks. Mark arrived a few minutes later, looking tired and disheveled. His once neat appearance had given way to wrinkled clothes and a shadow of stubble on his face. Thanks for meeting me, he said as he sat down beside her. Clara didn't respond immediately. She stared at the playground in the distance, watching children laugh and play. Finally, she turned to him. What do you want, Mark? He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. I messed up, Clara. I know I did. I should have told you about the money, about the bills, about everything. I thought I could fix it on my own. By lying to me? Clara shot back, her voice sharp. By taking our savings without even asking? Mark flinched. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just trying to help Sophia. She's been through so much, losing her husband, raising 2 kids on her own. And what about me, Mark? Clara interrupted. What about us? Do you think this hasn't been hard for me too? I was your partner. You were supposed to trust me, but instead, you chose to betray me. I didn't see it that way, Mark said quietly. I thought I was doing the right thing. The right thing for who? Clara asked, her eyes narrowing. Because it sure wasn't for us. Mark looked down at his hands, his shoulders slumping. You're right, he admitted. I let my guilt over Sophia's situation cloud my judgment. I put her needs above yours, above ours, and I'm sorry. Clara shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Sorry doesn't fix this, Mark. Sorry doesn't pay the rent or undo the damage you've done. I know, Mark said. But I want to make it right. I'm starting therapy. I've been talking to my boss about picking up extra work to pay back what I took. I'm trying, Clara. Clara stared at him, searching his face for the man she had once trusted implicitly. She could see the regret in his eyes, but regret wasn't enough. Trust, once broken, wasn't so easily repaired. I appreciate that you're trying, she said finally. But I don't know if I can forgive you for this. Mark nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting her response. I understand. But I'm not giving up on us, Clara. Not yet. Clara didn't reply. She wasn't sure what to say. Part of her wanted to believe him, to hold on to the hope that they could rebuild what had been lost. But another part, the part that had been betrayed, wasn't ready to let go of her anger. Later that evening, Clara returned to the apartment for the first time in days. Mark wasn't home, but Sophia was. She was sitting on the couch, her kids playing quietly on the floor. When Clara walked in, Sophia looked up, her expression a mix of guilt and defiance. Clara, she said hesitantly, can we talk? Clara crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. What is there to talk about, Sophia? You've already said enough with your actions. Sophia stood, wringing her hands nervously. I know I've messed up. I know I've taken advantage of you and Mark, and I'm sorry. Are you? Clara asked, her voice cold. Because it didn't seem like you were sorry when you were posting pictures of your shopping trips and new clothes while we were struggling to keep a roof over our heads. Sophia winced. I was trying to keep up appearances. After Tom died, I didn't know how to handle everything. The bills, the kids, the loneliness, it all felt like too much. So I made bad choices. Bad choices that hurt other people, Clara said. Do you even realize the position you've put us in? I do now, Sophia said, her voice cracking. I've been selfish and I see that now. I want to make things right, Clara. I've already started looking for a job, and I've talked to Mark about moving out as soon as I can. Clara stared at her, unsure whether to believe her words. Sophia had always been good at playing the victim, but this time there was something different in her tone. Something genuine. We'll see, Clara said finally. Actions speak louder than words, Sophia. If you really want to make things right, show me. Sophia nodded, tears streaming down her face. I will. I promise. That night, Clara sat alone in the apartment, her mind racing. The confrontation with Sophia had left her feeling drained, but also strangely hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, things could change. But she knew better than to let her guard down. Promises were easy to make, but much harder to keep. As she stared out the window at the city lights, Clara realized that no matter what happened, she needed to prioritize herself for once. She couldn't keep sacrificing her happiness and stability for others. It was time to take control of her own life. With a renewed sense of determination, Clara picked up her phone and started making a plan. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She wasn't going to let anyone else dictate her path ever again. Clara sat in the corner booth of a small coffee shop in downtown Portland, the same one she had visited countless times during her marriage to Mark. This time, though, the visit felt different. She had requested to meet him here, not to rekindle anything, but to finalize what had been left unresolved. Mark arrived a few minutes late, his shoulders slightly hunched and his expression weary. He spotted Clara and gave her a small, hesitant wave before approaching the table. Hey, he said, sitting down across from her. Clara nodded, folding her hands on the table.
Hey.
The silence between them was heavy. For a moment, Clara simply studied him. Mark looked thinner, older, as if the weight of everything had finally settled on him. It wasn't anger she felt toward him anymore, just a quiet sadness. I wanted to meet to talk about what happens next, she said finally, her voice calm but firm. It's time to make decisions? Mark nodded, his eyes dropping to his coffee cup. I get it. I've been thinking about it too. I've been staying at a motel for now, but I found a roommate situation that's more permanent. Clara raised her eyebrows. A roommate? Yeah, Mark said, his voice soft. I need to figure out who I am without everything else. Without Mom's influence. Without Sophia leaning on me. I've started therapy too. That's a good step, Clara said, surprised by his candor. Mark met her gaze for the first time. I know I can't undo what I've done, Clara. I just want you to know I'm sorry for everything. for breaking your trust, for not putting you first, for all of it. Clara nodded slowly. I appreciate that, Mark. But this isn't just about apologies. It's about actions. I need to move forward, and I can't do that if I'm tied to this mess. Mark looked away, his jaw tightening. Does that mean you're filing for divorce? Clara exhaled. She had thought long and hard about this. Yes, she said finally. It's what's best for both of us. We need to start over, separately. Mark nodded, his expression pained but accepting. I understand. I don't want to hold you back anymore. For the first time in months, Clara felt a small weight lift off her shoulders. The decision, though painful, felt right. A week later, Clara was back in the apartment, boxing up her belongings. Mark had already moved out, leaving her the space to pack in peace. Sophia and her kids had left, too, opting to stay with Linda temporarily. The quiet was both eerie and comforting. As she packed, Clara found an envelope tucked into one of the kitchen drawers. It was addressed to her, the handwriting unmistakably Sophia's. She opened it cautiously, expecting yet another apology. Instead, she found a check and a short note. Clara, I know this doesn't fix everything, but it's a start. I've been working and saving, and I'm going to pay back every cent I owe you. Thank you for being the one who forced me to wake up. You didn't have to, but you did. I'll never forget it. Sophia. Clara stared at the check, her emotions a mix of surprise and disbelief. It wasn't a large amount, but it was a step, a tangible effort to repair the damage. Months passed. Clara moved into a small one-bedroom apartment across town, closer to her school. The space was modest but cozy, filled with sunlight and the hum of new beginnings. She began to focus on herself for the first time in years, rediscovering hobbies she had once loved, like painting and hiking. Tina remained her constant support, their friendship growing even stronger. One evening, as Clara sat on her balcony sketching the city skyline, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Tina. You're going to want to see this. Check Sophia's Instagram. Clara hesitated before opening the app. Sophia had been quiet on social media for months, but the latest post showed her kids at a park, smiling wide as they played. The caption read, starting fresh. New job, new outlook. Grateful for second chances. Clara stared at the screen, a small smile tugging at her lips. Maybe, just maybe, Sophia was turning things around. A year after everything had fallen apart, Clara found herself back at the same coffee shop, but this time for a different reason. She was meeting Tina to celebrate a milestone, her promotion to department head at her school. As Clara sipped her coffee, she thought about how far she had come. The pain of betrayal had lessened, replaced by a quiet strength. She no longer felt defined by the mistakes of others. Instead, she had rebuilt her life on her terms. Here's to starting over, Tina said, raising her mug in a toast. Clara clinked her mug against Tina's, a genuine smile on her face. Here's to growth. Outside the coffee shop, the city buzzed with life. Clara watched as people hurried past, each carrying their own stories of struggle and resilience. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. No longer burdened by the weight of betrayal, she was free to embrace the future, a future she had built with her own strength and determination.